इधर बैठ जाओ नीता, मैं इधर बैठ जाऊं। Good morning, students. So I hope you are all fine.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So those of you who missed the classes last week, so I'll just brief you about what we had done. So we just started with the beginning, right? We took a look at the syllabus that you have and why you have this in your syllabus, right? And then we just touched upon the basic definition of traditional knowledge, right? So we in this lecture we are going to continue with that. So I'll just share my screen. All right. So those of you who had missed it last week, so I'll just brief you and bring you, along the rest of the class, right? So we started with this topic of traditional knowledge. So as you know, this subject is the sense of Indian knowledge and tradition, right? And at times it is written as the sense of Indian tradition and knowledge. So again, what we are going to take a look at is what is traditional knowledge, what is Indian tradition, right? Within the idea of traditional knowledge, we are going to, take a look at various cultures which exist within India. As you know, India is a very diverse country, right? We have different, let's say, cultures. Even you move beyond 20, 15 kilometers, the culture of a place changes, the language changes, the rituals also, they get a slight variation. Now, if we talk about Punjab, within Punjab, no doubt, broadly, we are following the same customs, the same rituals. However, every area has its own way of doing the same thing. So there might be some changes here and there. You might have noticed this even in weddings, that, every family has its own ways, its own rituals, right? So no doubt we are broadly following the same idea, but still there are going to be few variations. So that leads to, a more culturally rich place, right? A culturally rich country, and we have a lot of diversity as well. So that is how, even in terms of traditional knowledge, there you will find a lot of diversity, a lot of variation. So these were a few key terms and concepts which we discussed, right? So we discussed what is colonization, how is it linked to traditional knowledge, how is it linked to your culture. Then we discussed cultural bias, then what is living knowledge, then what is traditional knowledge, which is also, at times referred to as indigenous knowledge or traditional ecological knowledge. Then we discussed Western scientific knowledge. All right, and these are the few, learning objectives. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. Of course, you can move beyond this list and learn some more, right? There could be more learning objectives as well. So we will be, comparing traditional knowledge with Western knowledge, and we are going to be dealing with some concrete examples of the impact of declining traditional knowledge and lifestyles. Then also the historical impact of social change. So within this, I discussed a bit about, the British rule or Mughal rule, or the Delhi Sultanate rule that we have had for the past few centuries, right? Whichever kings they have reigned here, right, till the British came and they established their own empire. Then we also will be describing physical and social context in which traditional knowledge develops. And of course, some examples of the ways in which modern science and traditional knowledge are working together. So it's not that ये दोनों बहुत ही separate एक paths है. No, these paths they are converging as well, right? So a good example would be जैसे आपने आयुष सुना होगा, right? We have this going back to traditional methods of healing, traditional methods of medicine, right? So उसमें क्या है? We have Ayurveda, we have Unani, then we have several others, homeopathy. So ये सारे kind of they have their roots back in traditional knowledge systems, right? And today we see that even the MBBS doctors, the allopathy doctors, they are also resorting to some solutions from these branches. So ऐसा नहीं है कि दोनों opposite ends हैं, they might be different in their methodology. ठीक है, कैसे जैसे अगर हम आयुर्वेद एंड होम्योपैथी की बात करें या आयुर्वेद एंड एलोपैथी की बात करें, उनकी मेथोडोलॉजी बहुत डिफरेंट है अबाउट अप्रोचिंग अ डिजीज, व्हाट इज रॉन्ग विद द बॉडी, द डायग्नोसिस. हाउएवर, now realizing the good features of each, there is a convergence of both. So that is one example of how traditional knowledge and modern science they are working together, right? So aapke syllabus mein even yoga has been given a lot of importance, so we will be definitely going into the nitty gritties of the same. So defining traditional knowledge, why define it at all, right? So why do we need to define it? Because see, कोई भी आपने डिसिप्लिन में पढ़ना है, जैसे आप मैकेनिकल में हो, राइट? तो आपके डिफरेंट सब्जेक्ट्स हैं, तो why are they different? It was to make it easier for you to follow, right? How would it be अगर सारे एक ही combined हो? हाँ जी, what do you say? आपके लिए easy होगा कि difficult होगा? Yes, you may reply in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. Okay, so just a very simple question. Would it be easier or difficult if all the subjects were combined, there was no any distinction between them? Wonderful. Yes. So Karan, Saurav, you are very right that it is definitely going to be very difficult and confusing. अगर कोई भी डिसिप्लिन को हमने अच्छे से पढ़ना है, उसको क्लियरली अप्रोच करना है, तो पहले हमने उसकी बाउंड्री सेट करनी है कि इस डिसिप्लिन में क्या चीज आएगी, क्या चीज नहीं आएगी. सी, नाउ दिस बाउंड्री इज नॉट गोइंग टू बी वेरी हार्ड एंड फास्ट. देयर माइट बी सम मिक्सिंग विद अदर डिसिप्लिन्स एज वेल. हाउएवर, वी डू डिफाइन वन एरिया कि इस सब्जेक्ट में हम ये वाले टॉपिक्स करेंगे, राइट? So in different subject you are going to deal with different topics. Similarly, just to make things more convenient, organized, we need to define clearly what is traditional knowledge, and this will also help us distinguish it from other kinds of knowledge. So students, just give me a minute. All right, students, sorry for the interruption. All right, so we were discussing why we need to define it at all. All right. Just a minute.
Hello.
Yes. So who is this with the username Galaxy? All right. So coming back to why we need to define it at all, number one is to distinguish it from other kinds of knowledge. Then when the people with whom it originates are trying to preserve and renew their cultural identity. Now again, one another reason why we need to define it is, the people who are responsible for originating it, who are responsible for its construction, right? Whenever they are trying to preserve it, whenever they're trying to renew their cultural identity, that is again when we need to clearly
प्लीज पंजाबी में
define
बोलो
it.
मैडम.
Hanji, yes, anything wrong? So who is this student with this username Galaxy J8? So you can leave a message in the chat in case you have any doubt. All right. So the ones who are responsible for this traditional knowledge, when they are trying to renew it, when they are trying to preserve it, so that is definitely when they also need to define it clearly that what all it includes. All right. So again, what are some of the definitions? We have traditional knowledge, then we have traditional ecological knowledge, traditional environmental knowledge, and indigenous knowledge. Now, again, these are all quite related, quite linked to each other, right? So you could call it traditional knowledge. Then within this realm, there is ecological knowledge as well, knowledge about the environment, right? So people back then, they did not have had access to, you know, other books or encyclopedias. They were not around there. What they depended on was what they had learned from the previous generations, and they were passing on the same to the next generations, right? Then we have traditional environmental knowledge, right? So that is again linked to whatever you know about the environment. And also another word which is used is indigenous knowledge, right? So I explained the word indigenous to you last week, something which is native to a particular area, right? So let's say the Royal Bengal tiger is indigenous to India, specifically the East India, right? The Bengal region, the Sundarbans forest, right? So indigenous हो गया कि जो उसी जगह पे belong करता है and it is not found anywhere else, जो वहां का ही है. All right. So moving further, again, it is knowledge that derives from or is rooted in the traditional way of life of aboriginal people. And another is it is the accumulated knowledge and understanding of the human place in relation to the universe. Now, these are seemingly very simple words, however, they hold much deeper meaning within them. Right? तो अगर हम बात करते हैं knowledge which is derived from or is rooted in the traditional way of life of aboriginal people. So can anyone tell me who are the aboriginal people? So अभी पीछे एक स्लाइड पे उनकी पिक्चर भी थी, like one of the aboriginal people. हाँ जी, anyone? So I believe you must be knowing. So aboriginals are जो वहाँ के ओरिजिनल लोग होते हैं, राइट? अगर आप नोटिस करो, इफ यू आर अवेयर ऑफ हिस्ट्री, लेट्स से वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री और इवन इंडियन हिस्ट्री, so you would notice. So who is the student Galaxy J? Please unmute yourself and kindly change your name as well. I won't be able to mark you present. Yes, please change your name to whatever is your proper name and roll number. All right. So talking about the Aboriginal people, so we had some people who were, staying in one particular area, right? Back when जब अभी migration start नहीं हुई थी, people had not discovered going to other different places. They were just staying in one particular area. So those people are the original inhabitants of that area. Like in India, if we talk about that, we have various tribes. जो शुरू से इंडिया में ही सेटल्ड है, वो बाहर से नहीं आए थे, राइट ना वो कहीं बाहर मूव आउट करे हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल जैसे मैंने आपको अंडमान एंड निकोबार आइलैंड्स के कुछ ट्राइब्स बताए थे, राइट? सो दे आर पर्टिकुलरली वल्नरेबल ट्राइबल ग्रुप्स, उनको कहते हैं पीवीटीजी. उसमें क्या है कि वो उधर ही रहे हैं, उनका वही कल्चर चल रहा है, दे आर काइंड ऑफ नॉट कनेक्टेड विद द आउटसाइड वर्ल्ड, उनसे उनका कंप्लीट कट ऑफ है. सो आप नोटिस करेंगे कि उनका जो वे ऑफ लाइफ है, इट इज हमें फील होगा कि ये तो बहुत ही पुराना स्टाइल है, बहुत ही पुराना लाइफ स्टाइल है. Why? Because the world here has changed rapidly and we have changed with the world. The change has reached everywhere. However, it could not reach that particular island and they're still leading their life as they were leading, let's say, hundreds of years back. उसमें कुछ इतने changes नहीं आए, इतनी technology नहीं आई, innovation नहीं आई, right? तो उसी में, so they are the aboriginal people of that particular area. Similarly, if you talk about Australia, तो ऑस्ट्रेलिया में भी कुछ ऐसे ट्राइब्स हैं जो शुरू से वहां पे थे. अगर हम यूएस की बात करें, तो यूएस तो लैंड ऑफ माइग्रेंट्स ही है, राइट? सो इफ आई एम टॉकिंग इन जस्ट डाइग्रेसिंग अ बिट, जैसे ट्रम्प था, सो ट्रम्प हैड दिस एंटी इमिग्रेंट स्टैंस, ही डिड नॉट वांट मोर इमिग्रेंट्स. हाउएवर दैट इज आयरॉनिकल. व्हाई? बिकॉज जो आज प्रेजेंट अमेरिकन हैं, दे आल्सो एट वन पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम दे केम फ्रॉम ब्रिटेन. They shifted from Britain because America was not populated as much. जो अमेरिका के नेटिव पीपल थे, द एबोरिजिनल पीपल, दे वर द जिनको हम रेड इंडियंस कह देते हैं. However, red Indians is not a correct term. It is considered racial, right? So the correct term is Native Americans, right? So Native Americans were the aboriginal people. जैसे अभी मैं उसकी आपको पिक्चर एक दिखा देती हूँ. These people, now these are the native people of, as you can see from their clothes, they live near the poles, right? They probably live in the north pole वाला जो हमारा एरिया है, आर्कटिक रीजन है, राइट? रशिया के हायर रीचेस हो सकते हैं, फिनलैंड नॉर्वे का एरिया हो सकता है, और इवन हायर रीचेस ऑफ कनाडा. सो जस्ट थोड़ा सा इसमें ज्योग्राफी भी आएगी, राइट? सो आई होप यू रिमेंबर दैट ग्लोब और द वर्ल्ड मैप, राइट? So yeah, because you can see from their clothes that they are wearing very thick clothes made of animal skin. So probably these are Eskimos, right? How? And these are the original people जो वहाँ पे शुरू से रह रहे थे. So they are the people who are aboriginal people, right? And now traditional knowledge is knowledge which derives from or is rooted in the traditional way of life of aboriginal people. Now whether the people are saying these are from कोई अमेरिका की हम बात कर रहे हैं या हम साउथ अमेरिका की बात कर रहे हैं, right? If we are talking about Canada, then if we are talking about even India or maybe China, Mongolia, कोई भी country ले लो, हर एक जगह पे पहले कोई ना कोई तो था. Then later, as we moved ahead in time, the man discovered ways of moving about. हमारे means of transport आ गए in very primitive form. People started shifting from one place to another, right? So India में तो हमारी कितनी foreign invasions हुई हैं, right? So we have always had this influx of immigrants coming in. Present day terminology में जिनको हम immigrants कहेंगे, right? So इधर से भी कुछ लोग बाहर शिफ्ट हो रहे थे, they were going to Persia, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, wherever, Central Asia, right? So Mughals, they basically came from this area of Persia, and वहां पे वो कहाँ से आए थे? From Central Asia, right? So ये माइग्रेशन होती रही है, तो अब अभी तो इतना मिक्स हो गया, right? तो present day we don't call ourselves immigrants. Why? Because we feel we are natives from this place. However, way back our ancestors, they must have shifted from somewhere outside, right? Because we are not the aboriginal people. Aboriginal people are different, who have always stayed here only, right? So जो उनकी knowledge है, उनका जो traditional way of life है, that is what is traditional knowledge, right? So they have had access to, they know this world, this area better than us. They would know the vegetation. चाहे वो educated नहीं है in the formal sense, they might not have gone to schools or colleges, but they would know more about the environment, they would know more about survival, right? Because they have always been at the mercy of nature. वो तो हमेशा natural environment में ही रहे हैं.
Hello.
So who is that? See, I am not going to force you to attend my class. If you're not interested, you may leave the class, but don't spoil it for everyone. All right, coming back here. So it is also the accumulated knowledge and understanding of the human place in relation to the universe, right? So again, ये आप सोचोगे कि काफी ये तो spiritual से थोड़ा सा spirituality की तरफ digress हो रहा है, right? So yes, that is how the traditional knowledge works, right? So this is another very important topic within it. That is जो हमारी years की knowledge है, centuries की knowledge है, and understanding है कि how much do we matter in the bigger scheme of the things in this cosmos, right? If we are talking about the whole universe, तो उसमें humans की क्या place है और क्या value है, right? Right now, yes, man feels that we are the supreme beings. ठीक है, हमारे पास brain है, हमारे पास abilities है, how we have changed the world around us, we have technology, touch screen phones and laptops and what not. See, हम Zoom पे class लगा रहे हैं, right? So at this is what we feel that we are better than all the other living beings. However, every living being has its own role to play in the universe, and traditional knowledge acknowledges that role, right? उसमें ये नहीं है कि we are the supreme beings, हमारे सिर पे ही सारी दुनिया चल रही है, ऐसी बात नहीं है. They understand the human place in relation to the universe, right? So this is why you will notice that these traditional people, these tribes, these aboriginal societies, they really value environment, they really value nature, right? So अगर शुरू की बात करें तो हमारे gods भी ऐसे थे, they were derived from nature. वायु, सूर्य, right? So maybe Varun, I think maybe जल के लिए भी कोई water god भी होंगे, right? So this is why was this importance placed on nature? Because they realized what role the nature is playing, right? अभी हमने ये चीज realize नहीं की, and now we have these extreme climate events, we have global warming, we have temperature rise, we have climate change and whatnot, right? So this is again how you can link this with the contemporary world. So अगर आप इसको ऐसे लिंक करके अप्रोच करोगे ना, ये आपको इतना सब्जेक्ट बोरिंग नहीं लगेगा, इतना ड्राई नहीं लगेगा, ऐसे नहीं लगेगा कि ये क्या ही डाल दिया सिलेबस में, right? So the key is, the idea is to link it with what you are noticing in the world around you now. All right, so I hope you are following me till this point, and this doesn't seem too out of the world. So it seems relatively easy for everyone. All right, so I take your silence as a yes, right? So moving further, then environmental knowledge that has been gathered by Aboriginal peoples who have lived in and observed a particular area for generations. Now see, it's because they have inhabited a particular area for generations, for hundreds of years. This is why they have in-depth knowledge about that area, in-depth knowledge about the environment. अब ये लोगों को ना, even they are able to study animal behavior because they are noticing the wild animals around. So they would know that abhi agar this is a water body, so yes, even the animals are going to stay close to the source of water, right? And humans also want to stay close to the water. We also need water as one of our basic needs. So they know how to save themselves, how to stay safe, because that is an area where man-animal conflict can easily take place, right? Then systems of experiential knowledge gained by continual observation and transmitted among members of a community. So again, this knowledge, जो इनकी knowledge है ना, it is all based on experience. It is all based on practical application. उसमें कुछ ऐसा नहीं है कि सिर्फ बुक पढ़ी, जैसे हम पढ़ते हैं कई बार कि हमने बुक पढ़ ली किसी चीज के बारे में. We might have never seen that, right? All right, students, let's just pause here and I want to first take your attendance. So please be attentive, everyone.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Abhishek?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Aditya?
Yes, ma'am.
Then do I have Ajay in the class?
Yes, ma'am.
Akash?
Yes, ma'am.
Baljinder? Yes, Baljinder. Then Danish? Danish is not here. Jaspreet?
Present.
Karan Sharma?
Present.
Lovepreet?
Present, ma'am.
Maninder? Yes, Maninder. Manish?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Manveer? Naresh?
Yes, ma'am.
Rabjeet?
Yes, ma'am.
Prashant? Rudransh? Rudransh?
Absent.
Sahil? So Sahil is there in the class. Saurav Kumar, roll number 252.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And Saurav Kumar 253.
Present, ma'am.
Sukhvinder. Vishal Singh.
Present, ma'am.
Vivek.
Present, ma'am.
Charanpreet Singh. Nand Kishore.
Yes, ma'am.
Ritik Sharma.
Present, ma'am.
Sahil Dogra.
Present, ma'am.
Sameer.
Yes, ma'am.
Saurav Yadav. And Shivam.
Present, ma'am.
All right. So slightly better attendance today. So let me just repeat the names of the absentees for you. So Baljinder is not here, Danish is not here, Manish Sharma, Manveer Singh, Sukhvinder, Charanpreet, and Saurav Yadav. So I hope the rest of the students have been marked. So yes, Saurav, you have an exam for this subject as well. Right, so it is going to be for 100 marks. I'll let you know how much for the internal and the external, right? And what would be the pattern, whether it is going to be objective or subjective. I do believe it is going to be subjective, right? So I'll be sharing these PPTs with you so that you can prepare from these. And a good idea would be if you keep your notebook handy so that you can just note down if you feel anything else which is relevant. All right. So it's talking about systems of experiential knowledge gained by continual observation and transmitted among members of a community, right? So how are they transmitting this knowledge? Of course, they are transmitting it from one generation to another. Whatever they are learning, they are sharing it with others. This is how the whole community knows. The whole community is knowledgeable about the environment they are staying in, right? And it all comes from their practical experience. It all comes from the practical application of what they observe, what they learn, right? So it is all based on their observation. Moving further, again, how do we define traditional environmental knowledge? So it is a body of knowledge and beliefs transmitted through oral traditions and first-hand observation, right? So again, what they are observing on their own, not what they're learning from others. And they are transmitting these beliefs, this knowledge from one generation to another orally. Since there were no books, there was no written material, they might have not even known how to write, right? So जो ये सारी documentation हुई है, ये बहुत much later हुई है, ठीक है? पहले से तो सिर्फ एक दूसरे को बता के from one generation to another, that is how tradition was continued, that is how this knowledge was transmitted, right? Then quantity and quality of traditional environment knowledge varies among community members depending upon gender, age, social status, intellectual capability, and profession. Now, must notice that these are the factors which are influencing how much one person knows about the environment, right? So again, since if you believe the men traditionally have this role of, going out, hunting, fetching food, right? So naturally they are going to know different things. Women used to stay back. So women got to know more about agriculture. अब आपको surprising बात बताती हूँ, agriculture was actually women's invention. Why? Because the men were always outside, they were hunting, they were gathering food, they were gathering fruits, right? Women stayed back and they noticed that, okay, if you put particular seeds, these grains are growing and these are edible, right? So agriculture essentially is a, invention by women. So this is how women would know better about, since they were taking care of children, they would know better about that, right? So ये fields divided थे as per the roles the different genders were performing. All right. And of course, age के साथ आपकी knowledge increase होती है. So the senior members of the community would definitely know more than the younger members, right? Then social status. Now, if you notice, most of the tribes, most of these Aboriginal communities, they have a very, strict social hierarchy. ऐसा नहीं है कि उस हिरार्की के बेस पे आपके साथ बिहेवियर अलग से हो रहा है, राइट? जैसे आजकल प्रेजेंट डे हमारे है कि वी आर वेरी कास्टिस्ट, देयर इज कास्टिज्म इन इंडिया रैम्पेंट, राइट? क्या है कि अभी जो बिहेवियर है वो भी उसके ऊपर ही बेस होता है. However, back then there were social hierarchies, there were also these different castes, but उससे ना it was not linked with how you behave or how you treat that particular person in the community, right? So social status was there, social differences were there, but everyone had this minimum form of respect, right? So there was mutual respect for each other, there was this mutual regard for each other. However, yes, social status would also decide, जैसे एक यूजुअली आपने अगर वैसी मूवीज देखी हैं, राइट? तो कम्युनिटीज में एक लीडर होगा, which is, everybody looks up to that leader, everybody listens to that leader. That leader used to make these decisions कि कब कहाँ पे शिफ्ट होना है, कब हंट करने जाना है, क्या करना है, राइट? बाहर हमने आउटसाइडर से इंटरेक्शन करनी है या नहीं. सो डी फैक्टो लीडर यू कुड से मे बी, जैसे आज प्रेजेंट डे में तो हमारे पास बहुत ऑर्गेनाइज सिस्टम है, राइट? वी हैव द गवर्नमेंट, वी हैव द जुडिशरी, वी हैव द एग्जीक्यूटिव. उस टाइम पे ये थोड़ा सा लिमिटेड लेवल पे था, बट स्टिल देयर वाज दिस ऑर्गेनाइज सिस्टम टू रन दैट पर्टिकुलर कम्युनिटी. Then intellectual capability and profession. Of course, now it also depends on intellectual capability, right? A person who would be intelligent, no doubt that person would be capable of being a leader, right? That is how people would even listen to him or follow him, if he has some knowledge, if he has some intellectual capability. Then of course, depending on the profession as well. Now each person would know in detail about his or her particular profession. So if we are talking about those traditional societies, there are some people who are weaving baskets, there are some people who are experts at cooking, there are some people who are experts at hunting, right? There used to be some people who could make a guess about the weather, how the weather would change, right? उनके उस तरफ इंक्लिनेशन था, उनका उस तरफ इंक्लाइन था, या अगर हम वर्ड यूज करें, मॉडर्न वर्ड यूज करें, एप्टीट्यूड था. right? So depending on all these factors, the quantity and quality of traditional environmental knowledge, it varied from one person to another. All right. And the use of the word traditional in these definitions is often seen as problematic. तो कई बार ट्रेडिशनल वर्ड को भी इसके आसपास भी थोड़ी सी एक कंट्रोवर्सी है कि इस हम कॉन्टेक्स्ट में इसको यूज करें, राइट? So I'll stop right here. We'll move continue with this in the next class. We are meeting again, right, in the 5th lecture. So we'll start from this point in the 5th lecture. All right. So thank you for attending the class. That will be all.